Hi, I just realized that last winter I was on break, and the one before that I hadn't even started yet, which means this is my first ever video to shoot in winter. I am fucking freezing though, so I'll be right back. That's better. Why did I even do this bit? I had to take off and put on the costume twice. So dumb. So it's been a minute since I last did a review of a scam video or a travel guide, and these seem to do the best, narrowly surpassing videos with butts in a thumbnail.
Yeah, boy.
So today I'll be doing just that. There's this guy, Gareth Leonard. I hope I'm saying that right. I actually was recommended this video like within its first month on YouTube 6 months ago, and I saved it and kind of forgot about it. But I have now finally gotten around to watching it, and here I am talking about it. Thank you. Thank you. You're so kind. This is a great travel guide actually. Even I learned a few things from it, considering I haven't done much traveling in my life. Some of the stuff he says are common sense and general travel tips, but he does give some stuff specific to Egypt too. Before we get into it though, some things need to be pointed out. This guy is a seasoned traveler, as he put it himself, which means that he knows his shit. But on the flip side of that, it means that most of the things that are deal breakers for normal people will not faze him as much, as he has been to areas much sketchier than Egypt, namely Latin America, which he himself compares to in the video at some point. I'm not shitting on Latin America, he says it, not me. So he can make things look a lot more casual than they would feel when you're the one dealing with it yourself. Keep that in mind while watching. Also, the original video itself is over 30 minutes, so no way in hell I'm doing this in one go. This is part 1, and expect a part 2 shortly after it. Now, let's get into it. I already regret changing into winter clothes. Fucking Egypt weather.
Is Egypt safe to travel in? It's the #1 question I got before coming here. Now, I'm shooting this introduction here at the market in Luxor because this is my #1 tip. This is the #1 thing I've learned about Egypt and traveling in Egypt is it is safe relatively, with a few asterisks. What's plural for asterisk? Yes! Astri. Anyway, it is relatively safe, but with a few caveats.
Bruh, it's an asterisk. Asterisks is the plural. You're doing double plurals here. Confusing symbols aside, he is right. I've kinda always said that as well whenever people ask me if it's safe. It is safe, but with a few extra precautions that you need to take. Naturally, as things continue to get worse here, economically and socially, more and stricter precautions will be needed. But that doesn't change the fact that, indeed, as he said, it's safe with a bunch of astri next to it.
#1 is they are the greatest salesmen of all salesmen. They're always going to sell you something. This is all aspects of traveling around Egypt, especially in the locations where there is a ton of tourism.
Okay, man. Kinda debatable. I wouldn't call him the best salesman. You can almost always tell when one of them is being dishonest or trying to scam you. But they make up for that lack of talent with persistence. I have to give him that. You're just gonna have to get used to people trailing you for short periods of time. As you can see here in his intro that I skipped earlier.
Man, very nice, man. You are Rambo, man.
This is very common. Whether it's to sell you something, offer a service, or just talk to you. And don't get the wrong idea, we aren't some hyper-social beings who talk to anyone and everyone. You're just more interesting because you're not from here. Egyptians don't do this with each other and probably would look weird as fuck if they did it. Hello. Hi? Where are you from? Egypt? Like you? Really? Wow, very cool. Welcome, my friend. What? Bro, you want tour? Tour? I'm from here. I just said that I live here. Very cheap price.
They asked me for a tip going through security. They said, special treatment for you. You don't have to take your shoes off. This is pre-security before you even get into the airport. They said, special treatment for you. You don't have to take your shoes off. Nobody was taking their shoes off. And he said, can I have a tip? Can I have a tip for not taking your shoes off? Egyptians. I love it.
This is pretty odd. I'm not sure why he would go for that specifically. Like, there are less obvious lies to coax a tip out of someone. You could have just cut him in line, for example. That happens in a lot of government places. I don't know about airports specifically, but that seems plausible. Makes more sense. More than shoes anyway. Unless the TSI guy is into feet.
Oh, hell no!
All right, let me step away here for a second from the crowds and try to speak to you with the microphone on. Everything I've mentioned to this point is what I would call the direct approach. Really, people just trying to feed their families, and it's completely understandable to some extent. Now, it's the second method of people hustling here in Egypt that really turns people off from visiting, and that's a more deceitful way to get money from tourists and try to trick them into tips. And I watched a ton of scammers in Egypt videos and avoid this guy videos or the truth about Egypt videos, and really so many of the things that they talk about in these videos will be avoided by seasoned travelers. Yes, they're charging you tourist prices in the most tourist location on earth, the pyramids of Giza. Yes, it is a tourist trap. There's tons of people trying to sell you stuff.
Again, the misconception that the pyramids are the top tourist location, when in fact it's not even one of the top, statistically speaking. Yes, I have to point this out every time. Bite me. As for his commentary, I do respect an honest hustler. Sure, it gets annoying after the 5th one in a row offering something, but at least it's direct. At least the first part of it is. You see, when someone approaches you directly like this, while it is straightforward and seems to be honest, in some cases it may turn out not to be. Let me explain. A guy walks up to you and offers you to check out his shop, saying he has good prices, for example. If you do agree and take his word for it, after you browse and pick up stuff to buy, the price might not be as good as he said. Same for a taxi ride, throwing in prices after the deal is already made, so you are pressured to just agree or put in possession to haggle with them, as opposed to just saying no and walking away.
It doesn't have to be that dramatic, but I understand the drama and the chaos and the fear is what sparks views, and we'll talk about YouTube stuff later on when I talk about filming and police. But truthfully, a lot of these things come down to price negotiation.
While that is right and always has been, there's an argument to be made here that bad things stand out for a reason. You see, if someone visits a place and their experience is just fine, that is normal, it's to be expected. You don't get praise for being just normal. However, if their experience is shit, it will spark controversy. And the discussions generated from exposing shit like that is a good way to get things to change. Sometimes anyway, but it also serves as a warning to others, a source of awareness, so that other people know what it actually is and can make decisions accordingly. I've always said that this is my goal for making videos exposing the true side of Egypt, and I still stand by this sentiment. I'm not on some manhunt for Egypt's tourism or whatever. I'm not on a mission to destroy it. It's already doing that itself. I don't care one way or the other. My point is that I'm trying to let people know what they're getting into, so they don't get traumatized or just have a generally bad experience.
And also, a huge tip I can give you is never trust anyone who approaches you first. If someone approaches you and wants to hand you something or give you a gift or put something on your head or do anything with you or give you directions, do not trust them. This is basic traveler awareness, and Egypt will force you to learn this very quickly.
And this is a great tip. Rule of thumb, the honest ones will not be this pushy. I might not even be actively seeking out customers along with the other sketchy people. I've mentioned this briefly in my other video talking about the sketchy shit taxi drivers do. That's a good travel tip actually. Trust your gut and find yourself a less sketchy driver. Usually the ones who aren't all up in your face offering a ride are the more honest ones. And in an older travel guide I made too, I can't remember that far back. And also just generally trust your gut. If someone seems sketchy, odds are they are sketchy. Of course, that can be wrong, but ask yourself, am I willing to take my chances? The answer will have to depend on how big of a deal the situation is for me, but I personally don't like feeding into scams no matter how small they are.
And to get more specific, there are basically two types of scammers at the Great Pyramids. The first is those people that will try to get you to do a horse ride or a camel ride and then take you all around and then charge you a price afterwards. So to avoid this, simply tell them what price you're willing to pay ahead of time.
It is going to better your odds if you agree on a price beforehand, but if the guy you ended up with is bold enough, he might just nod along and then take you somewhere secluded and ask for money to bring you back. If you don't know the way back or you're just intimidated enough by that, you would have to pay up.
The second type of scammer that's going to be at the pyramids is those that will try to tell you what direction to go in, or follow me, you're going the wrong way, you're going out of bounds. And these people could be actually registered tour guides or officials or security guards, but do not believe them. You say, I'm all good, I'm going to go my own way, because eventually they're going to ask you for a tip. They will probably follow you around, keep telling you that you're not going in the right direction, and you just have to avoid them.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is kinda an obvious one. You wouldn't follow a random stranger in your home country, so obviously don't do it in a foreign one. If you're lost and ask someone for directions, that's fine, but if a random pop-up shows up offering directions, that's kinda sus. This isn't a video game with NPCs that are conveniently placed to show you directions or controls for the game. If someone offers something, they most likely want something back, especially if what they offer is BS. Also, notice how at the end of the video here, the guy grabbed the camera. Probably didn't like being filmed. People are terrified of that here, if you couldn't tell by now.
And if you do have an issue with someone at the pyramids or any historical site or anywhere across Egypt, tell them that you're going to contact the tourism police and see what they do. They're all very scared of the tourism police.
As for the tourism police, that is also solid advice, especially for tour guides. It's like getting cancelled on Twitter for content creators. It's the banishment to hell. I briefly talked about it before in my current top video like a year ago as well. And if the guy pushes it, till then you will file a report against them to the tourism police. They will back down. Don't let people push you around.
If you're with a guide, none of this stuff happens. They may come up to you, people may come up to you and ask you for something or tell you something, and a guide will immediately shut it down. Unless you're looking for souvenirs, and then a guide might direct you to a place or someone that he knows, he gets a commission from it, and that's something to be aware of as well.
Yeah, a guide can literally make or break your trip to Egypt. Many of the complaints I see online boil down to bad guides not doing their job or exploiting the person visiting, which is why I always tell people to carefully pick their guide and the company they visit with. I'm not knowledgeable enough to make recommendations of that sort, but Homeboy here does throw in a couple at the end, so stick around if you're interested. And don't you fucking skip to it.
I will now, and I will find you, and I will kill you.
Something a sketchy guide would do is take you on a detour to one of these said stores and just leave you there for an hour or something, hoping you would cave in from boredom and buy something, or that something would draw your attention. So the shop owner, whom he knows, makes money and he also gets his cut. On a side note, I think I recognize this place actually from a trip I went on when I was a kid. It do be a small country, huh?
But if you have a good guide, a reputable guide, they'll immediately say, okay, sorry, we'll keep going, if you tell them that you're not interested. For me, I avoid a ton of this headache because one, I never buy souvenirs when I'm traveling. I just don't want the extra baggage. And two, especially at the pyramids, I didn't do any of the animal rides, the camel rides, the horse, the donkey rides, because I just didn't like the way the animals were treated, so it's not something that I'm going to support personally. And
for me, personally, I think souvenirs would be not the stuff that are sold as souvenirs. I would rather buy something actually local, something from the place itself, not made for outsiders. Preferably something practical, like a piece of clothing, a keychain, or just pick a cool looking rock off a site I visited. But that's just me, of course. As for his take on animals, I do agree. I'm not a fan of animals that are twice my size, generally, but if I were to take a ride like this, I would do it with someone whose animal looks healthy. That way I'm supporting the person who actually gives a shit about the poor thing, and also not tiring out an already underfed or overworked animal.
And the only time I really ran into this kind of this bait and switch, kind of this deceitful way of selling that is prominent here in Egypt is on our trip to Siwa. And we had a local connection. We had a tour that we ended up paying a lot more money than we thought for, the desert tour. Again, we did a ton of stuff with this guy. He gave us one price at the beginning of the day. The end of the day, he said we took longer than expected, which throughout the time we were together, he was saying, oh, no, it's fine. We can do whatever you want. We can do whatever you want. And then at the end of it, he's like, oh, we took a lot longer than expected. I'm going to charge you more hours. And then also the hotel that we stayed at, they gave us one price at the beginning and then end up paying another price at the end. You really have to communicate with the people that you're with about the final price, because they will try to avoid the conversation or be like, oh, don't worry about it, we'll figure it out later. That's a huge thing for Egyptian scammers to do. Oh, don't worry, come over here, we'll do this now. And you say, how much? And they'll say, oh, no, we'll figure it out later, don't worry about it. And that's the same thing what happened to us in Siwa. So that was a bit frustrating. Now, granted, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt with the Siwa Oasis experience, because that was on me too for a lack of communication. So make sure you communicate prices at every step along the way.
He is giving good advice here. And he's also being very generous with these people, taking partial responsibility for not blowing their scam early on. It's kind of like saying, I'm sorry I fell for your bullshit, rather than, fuck you for doing that bullshit. But I digress. Confidence scares them, and if you look like you know your shit, even if you're completely clueless, it gives you a huge edge. You know what I always say? Looks above all. How many times have I said that by now?
And you have to be as assertive as other people are trying to get your money. And that is a tough thing for a lot of people, but when you're traveling, you have to be confident and assertive, and you have to be protective of your wallet. Otherwise, in Egypt, you can really be taken advantage of.
Which is one of the main reasons I hate traveling and dealing with people. Constantly being on the lookout like that is exhausting, and I already do enough of it, the other aspects of my wonderful life in Egypt. I ain't about to go around and add more to that list.
Now, based on all the stories that I've heard and videos that I've seen, we went into this trip knowing that this type of stuff was going to happen, so we were extra alert from start to finish. So if you go into it with the attitude that I need to be aware of everything, it will really change your perspective. And you'll just say no, you'll let it, roll off your shoulder. It won't be a problem for you. Honestly, we treated it like a game at one point. It was just fun to hear all the people trying to sell us stuff and other people trying to get us to go down to different places. Oh, no, you want to go this way, check out this shop. And we'd even walk with some people and just joke and talk with them. But truthfully, we went in with a really good attitude.
Bro just confirmed my answer that I keep preaching. Thanks, dude. Very based.
But I do have to say, Tyler's here with me as well. They are very, very playful. And they're very good.
Say hello.
So even if you don't want to buy anything, or you're not buying what they're selling,
And you find someone, he's coming.
and very, very good looking.
Thank you,
Very
guy,
good looking
bro.
people. They're very playful. So even if you're not buying something, you can still be playful. You can talk to them, but they're all gonna say something, no matter what. So no hustle in here though. No hustle here. You walk around camera or not, you're gonna be heckled.
Yeah, that's fair. Egyptians can be fun to hang out with, casually like that. Fleeting interactions are a good social aspect here, and we do be funny, if you couldn't tell by me. So it is usually a nice interaction with randoms like that, if you're up for it. There are other considerations, of course, if you have social anxiety. I imagine you'd be dying inside with everyone trying to talk to you and approach you, but if you have it that bad, you shouldn't even be visiting Egypt in the first place.
Also, side note, interjection here. When dealing with transportation here in Egypt, number one, you want to take Ubers pretty much everywhere. This is mostly in the bigger cities. So in Cairo, take an Uber everywhere and it's very, very cheap. One thing for me that I'm always anxious about, if I can jump in here from the airport, coming back from Luxor to Cairo, is how do I get to my location from the airport? I don't know why, but it's something I'm always super anxious about. So for this, in Cairo, it's very easy. They have Uber here. It's cheap, it's safe, and it's a great idea. So you just order it up once you get your baggage claim, which is right through there. And then you come outside, which is right through there. So you go directly across from arrivals. You go across the street, past all the taxi guys, down the stairs into the parking lot. And there is our Uber. There's gonna be a lot of taxi people asking you for stuff, but just keep going and you'll reach your Uber. That's how you get out of the airport in an Uber here in Cairo.
Uber made it to Egypt a few years ago and kinda took off in the bigger cities more than the smaller ones, which is to be expected. There was also a similar service called Kareem that showed up here. I think Uber ended up buying it, but I'm not sure. Now, the thing about these is, as he said, they are great for you as a visitor, and the fees will be in Egyptian pounds, which is used toilet paper by this point, so you can easily afford it, and it's hella convenient. For Egyptians though, sadly, it's not as affordable and it's not sustainable. Not many Egyptians can afford to pay 50 plus EGP every time they want to go somewhere, and the ones who can afford that have their own cars and don't need the service altogether.
In regards to taxis, that's a different story. They have very interesting negotiation tactics. Basically, they'll give you a very high price and then they'll cut it down. For example, we're here in downtown Luxor and he started at 10 US dollars. Then we said, no, we'll do 40 total Egyptian pounds. And he said, okay. And if he doesn't take that, immediately just walk away right away. And then they're like, wait, hold on. Okay, we'll do it. So big time negotiation. There's big gaps in where they start and where they'll end up. So keep that in mind.
It's kind of the same thing as that market tactic where they add a fake higher price on something and then cross that off so it feels like a deal when it's actually the original price. 40 Egyptian pound is pretty standard taxi fee here, especially for a tiny ass city like Luxor where he's at in this segment. But they'll shoot for the stars anyway. If it works, then alhamdulillah, but if not, they'll take their usual rate that they were gonna take anyway, or slightly higher if they can help it.
And in regards to public buses or tour buses, we honestly haven't taken them around much because they take a long time. We did do a horse and carriage ride at one of the temples, but make sure you predetermine your rate before you leave. No matter what you do, no matter where you are in the world, make sure you predetermine your transportation fee before you leave. That's transportation here in Egypt.
Okay, so these buses actually have fixed rates. It changes from city to city and depending on the routes they take within the same city too. For example, ones that take you around inside the city have a rate different from the ones that take you to more remote areas of the city or other districts that are a commute but still part of the city. Horse carriages though don't, so do as he says. I never understood the appeal of those things to foreigners, but to each their own, I guess.
But honestly, the time I felt most unsafe here in Egypt is actually driving in a car. The transportation, the drivers here are nuts. The traffic, they weave in and out, they don't respect the lines, it's wild. So for me, that's where I feel the most at risk, is in a car, because they are just wild, especially in Cairo.
It wouldn't be an Egypt video if the person talking didn't comment on traffic, now would it? Generally, just don't try to understand what the fuck is happening at any time. The people driving themselves don't, they just roll with it. You don't think about how you walk. These people don't think about how they drive. Rules do exist, but they don't mean shit. But it works anyway somehow. Not too well, but it works enough, I guess. You get used to it after a while. If you survive long enough. I'm just kidding. You'll be fine.
Or am I?
Is Egypt a cheap or expensive place to travel? And I would say generally, very generally speaking, if you don't get ripped off, it is a very inexpensive place to travel overall.
Okay, so homeboy here gets into details of his tour expenses, which I don't really have the experience to criticize, but the numbers seem fair enough. However, what I want to comment on is his statement here, saying that Egypt is inexpensive. First off, this video was posted 6 months ago, so that means like June or July 2022. They narrowly missed a critical breaking point in our economy. We all saw it coming and it was inevitable. In October, the Egyptian pound value started dropping like crazy. The temporary measures the government had in play finally gave in, and we haven't seen the end of it since. I kid you not, every time me or my family go to buy something, it costs more than the time before, just mere days or weeks prior. Can you guess what is not changing constantly amidst this hyperinflation? Income. Whether it's salary, pension, or eliminees, nothing has gone up a penny in years, despite the money effectively getting its value at least halved. And keep in mind, these were already terrible too. You have people getting pensions as low as 2,000 or 3,000 Egyptian pounds a month. Unlivable is an understatement. So what am I trying to get at here? Egypt is or was a cheap place if you don't work in it. But also keep in mind that the quality of what's available is lower than you can get outside. So you essentially just get what you pay for. I'll let you watch his breakdown real quick now.
The flight is obviously your biggest expense. That costs us about $1,000 each to get here, flying 24 to 30 hours. Second, your next biggest expense is going to be your hotels. And for our first night stay, first 3 nights actually, we stayed at that Pyramids Hotel right in Giza, and it was called the Guardian Guest House. Highly recommend it. And that was like $40 US a night, which was perfect for what we needed. Then the nicer end of hotels, we stayed at the Hilton in Luxor, which was beautiful, and that was about $108 a night, which is an incredible steal, and I highly recommend it if you want a taste of the nicer things along the Nile River. And on top of that, you have food, and the food costs were about from $3 to $8 a meal. Very inexpensive, especially when you're going out with locals. They'll set you up with the right prices in the right places if you go with the right people. And on top of that, true Egyptian friends, as you've seen from a couple of these episodes, they won't let you pay at all. True Egyptian hospitality, which a lot of YouTubers don't get a chance to see, and a lot of people traveling there don't get a chance to see. A true Egyptian friend won't even let you touch the bill.
You can pay tomorrow.
No.
Tomorrow.
I can take credit.
You can finish all your money tomorrow, okay?
Whatever money we have tomorrow, we're spending it no matter what.
Okay, but
That is true. Even among each other here, it's almost expected to pay for each other. If you sit with a friend at a cafe or take a bus together, it's kind of like a fight over who gets to pay first. Not an actual fight, of course, but you get the idea. Which I know is confusing since a ton of other people are trying to rip you off, but yeah, there are 2 sides to it, and both are extreme.
In regards to tipping, this is the most interesting aspect of traveling in Egypt. Number one, you have these small little tips that you give off to people for helping you in certain locations. So if you go around with 20 Egyptian pounds, anybody's bothering you, if people want to help you out with stuff, just hand over 20, which is about $1, little dollar and little change. So we
Even 20, if you give them 5 pounds, and then
give them 5 pounds.
5 or 10 pounds.
Give them a few pounds, so keep small change on you. Give out a few pounds. People helping you with parking, people helping in the pyramids, outside of food places, so that's another thing. Now, you can easily say no to these people, but we have found that it's just as easy to give them a 5, a 10, or a 20 Egyptian pound if they help us with directions, or there's the parking guys, these little people that are just hustling to, make ends meet, small amount of money, no problem, we'll give it over, but you can always say no to that.
This is a good tip, and in a lot of situations, it actually saves you a lot of BS. For example, if you get stuck with paperwork somewhere, if you slip a bit of money to a worker, they can help you or even cut you past the process entirely. Same with janitors in a school or college. All the, I want to say low-tier workers, but that sounds demeaning, but I don't mean it badly. The people working simple jobs like this can be super helpful for just a small amount of cash. Also, 20 Egyptian pound is not even worth $1 anymore, so even better. For you anyway. That fucking sucks for us.
Tipping in general, I give about 600 Egyptian pounds per day for a full day guide along the cruise and other places that we've had. And then I'll give about 100 to 200 Egyptian pounds to drivers. Now that varies a little bit. I'll give a little bit more if they're going to be on camera a lot. If I'm asking them a ton of questions and I'm filming them for their answers, I will give them a little bit more, up to 800 Egyptian pounds. And this is a pretty good price. So that's about, 32 to 40 US dollars. So a nice tip. And you could do anything from 200 to 400 to 600. We tip a lot more because the guys are on camera and we're asking usually a lot more. Now, there has been a couple of times where we don't really use the guide much at all. In those circumstances, I'll go maybe 200 to 400 Egyptian pounds. So it really depends on you, how much work and effort they put into it. Now, definitely the most expensive portion of our trips were 1, the Nile River cruise, and 2, the trip to Siwa Oasis. And we did have a local connection. We did a rental car. We also gassed for 9 hours each way of driving, and then tour through the desert. He was with us all day, but ended up charging a little bit over 200 US dollars, which is a pretty high amount. Again, we were filming, we set up the dinner, so we were happy to pay a little bit more. Again, there was a confusion with price, which I explained, but still it was about 300 US dollars for 3 people for 2 nights. So really not bad. It's just, you want to know prices up front, that's the biggest thing. And I'm going to reiterate that in this video. Understand prices on every single little aspect of your trip before you do anything. Overall, inexpensive.
Okay, that's it for part 1. If I successfully got you hooked on this cliffhanger, go ahead and subscribe. If you like this content, let me know. You can also support me on Buy Me a Coffee and come chat with me on Discord. All that being said, I love you all so much, and I'll see you soon. But until then, take care.